Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where we are witnessing both Hollywood and video game history. Woo! If there wasn't a run in Hollywood on video game IP before, although, I want to say, there's so much I want to say. This is an amazing episode. We have so much to discuss. But I guess the first thing I would say is that while the video game business might feel, after so many years of Hollywood getting it wrong, decades, that their ship has finally come in and they're the new comic book movie, all that attention isn't always a good thing. I mean, it totally ruined the comic book business, but yet comic books never generated the kind of revenue that video games do. So that's going to help the video game business. But still, up until now, while it was making a ton of money, the video game business kind of existed in its own pocket dimension. Nobody else really knew about it or followed it. But now that everybody is starting to pay attention to it, thanks to it entering the movie and TV space so successfully, well, all those eyeballs can lead to other things, like probably unionization. And also, the possible second, they had a strike before with the actors, but it looks like there might be a new one. I don't know if that was resolved or not, or if it's just on the back burner while SAG tries to get the overall strike resolved. But it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I think making a lot of money and no one noticing is kind of maybe the ideal situation. So we'll see if video games come to regret this. But in the meantime, I think because, up until now, nobody felt they could get into that space. They were like, you can't get in there unless you're making video games. But now it seems you can. And so that's quite interesting. Now, the way this would work, so today, you would see all the money that yet another video game project made. And what you would do if you were a studio head or a producer is you would call up your development department and you would say, because that's what development does. They're supposed to look for properties to be made into movies. And you would say, you got to get me some video games. I'd also say, what video games do we already own the rights to that maybe we're not utilizing? So you want to find either a standalone game or a publisher that maybe has multiple games and hopefully doesn't have a deal yet with somebody. So if there's any video game publishers out there, no matter how small, because Five Nights at Freddy's was small, I hope you have an agent and you might want to try and get in on this. Try and get an agent and see if an agent can, if people aren't paying attention to you, maybe you can lob some attention, some emails and calls at these development departments, because every studio and producer is going to be like, just like there was a run on comic book movies, Hollywood's going to run it into the ground like they run everything into the ground. But it'll be fun for a while. All right, so anyway, and I'm curious what I'll ask you later, but I'll ask you at the top of this video, for those of you who are hardcore video game fans, and not only do I know that some of you are, but it seems a lot of you are, what games do you think would be next or should be next? All right, so yes, Five Nights at Freddy's doubled. It's already very optimistic tracking. People thought 40 was going to be amazing. Now it's close to 80. That's incredible. And some of you might be like, it's going to drop off a rock next week. Who cares? The movie only cost $20 million. It already made a ton of money. They're definitely going to make a sequel. It's definitely a new IP for Universal. There's a lot of cash here. So it's the biggest debut ever for a Halloween weekend, the biggest debut ever for Jason Blum, when he really needed this, by the way, to make everyone forget his Exorcist debacle, right? He's like, that was the misnomer. I think I used that word correctly. All right, so anyway, and then the second highest debut ever for a video game adaptation, with only Super Mario Brothers beating it, and that also came out this year. Because yes, before 2023, video game movies were either strictly for families or wildly uneven, and nobody wants to get into a wildly uneven business, which is why Hollywood, for the most part, hasn't done a lot with video games. Just like, comic book movies weren't going so well for quite some time. But again, that was before 2023, the year where Hollywood cracked the magic formula, keeping the creatives in the loop. But mind you, they didn't do that willingly. For instance, about 20 years ago in 2005, Microsoft tried to get a Halo movie made. And they even had couriers dressed as Master Chief going to the studios in person to hand deliver the script that they had commissioned, which was a big no-no. Hollywood doesn't like when you do that. They're like, we're supposed to write the scripts. Thank you very much. This is what we do. And it was such a bad situation. Microsoft wanting to continue to be creatively involved and wanting a part of the money. What? That was a deal breaker in 2005, even though it was Halo, with Hollywood understandably assuming that it would just go the way of so many other popular video games that had failed to make the jump. So Halo eventually did make it to a screen, a tiny one for Paramount Plus in 2022. But the video game creatives were not involved, and the showrunners intentionally avoided the game. Does that sound devastatingly familiar? And that was just last year. So, Hollywood is still learning. Things are really aggressively changing. It's fascinating to watch. Hollywood's a very slow learner, but they are learning. But anyway, today, with Hollywood in an IP arms race, thanks to largely streaming, creating an insatiable demand for new content, and also streaming making it harder to get people to go to the theater. So you need a big brand to make people feel something's theater worthy. And then, of course, Hollywood has run a lot of the IP that they already own into the ground. They're like, oh, we broke all this. What else is there for us to break? Plus, fans have a lot more power these days on social media, and fans are very loyal to creators, which has given a lot of power to creators as well. And better deals are getting signed. Now, again, it's studios are not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They're like, maybe that would be a nice thing to do. It's because it's how they're going to make more money. Also, it's the way to get the deal done, because streaming has also increased the number of players in the game. Before, it was just the old school studios that were competing for IP. But now you have tech giants, Netflix, Amazon, and Apple also bidding on that IP. So it's a seller's market to a degree. You got to offer a lot of money, and you got to offer creative involvement to get someone to go with you. All right, so and I think it's interesting. It's very interesting. I'd be curious what you think is how things are changing and what your observations are. And kudos, by the way, to mega horror producer Jason Blum, who, as I said, found a diamond in the rough, an indie video game that was made incredibly popular thanks to YouTube videos featuring gameplay and theories about the mythology of Five Nights at Freddy's, and featured some of those YouTubers in the movie itself. We'll talk more about the rise of video game movies and TV shows in just a moment. There's more to discuss. But first, Hollywood would be wise to realize that this isn't just a win for video game adaptations, but also event moviegoing. This was a mini Barbenheimer, right after Barbenheimer. Isn't that exciting? We wondered how long we'd have to wait for that to repeat itself, and it kind of did. And it's not even that many, with Five Nights at Freddy's opening surprisingly close to Oppenheimer. I mean, that's amazing. Also from Universal. What a year for Universal. In large part due to video games and horror. Wow. Jason Blum's like, I'm part of that, even though he did embarrass them with Exorcist. Anyway, so yes, Hollywood, the trades are scratching their heads, saying, how did a movie do so well at the box office when it was made available day and date on streaming? This is fascinating. This is amazing. Five Nights at Freddy's is the second biggest debut of this kind, coming in right behind Black Widow, but that, of course, was released during the pandemic. In fact, some of the trades are saying that Universal left money on the table by offering a streaming option. How much more money could it have made? But I would counter, did they? Universal has become an industry leader when it comes to thinking outside the box with distribution strategies. Pretty impressive for an old school studio. You would think one of the tech giants would be leading this charge. And to me, what I see is that Universal came up with a way that people could see Five Nights at Freddy's however they wanted to. And everybody could see it opening weekend. That's incredible. This could be the future, giving moviegoers a choice. And that choice ended up not hurting the box office. If anything, it fueled it because everybody was watching Five Nights at Freddy's this weekend one way or another. That's so incredible. I mean, you can't do this with every movie, but I mean, it gets more people talking about it. Five Nights at Freddy's trended on Thursday night and Friday on social media. So more and more people go, hey, maybe we should go to the multiplex. Maybe we should go and watch it on Peacock. I mean, what if Killers of the Flower Moon had debuted in both places? Would more people have gone to see it? We're going to talk about that movie too. Had a bad second weekend. But I think it's a fascinating discussion. And bravo to Universal for trying this. I think it's exciting. Also, Five Nights at Freddy's was not a digital release sold a la carte like Universal did with Trolls 2 during the pandemic, a game-changing moment in Hollywood, and gave Universal the confidence to keep on experimenting. So here, Universal was looking not so much for a monetary gain on digital, but for a streaming gain of subscribers on Peacock, a space that's become very competitive with a lot of churn. And maybe they did get a lot of new subscribers. We'll see, and then maybe while people are on there, they check out what else is available on Peacock. Maybe they forget to cancel when it renews in a month. Who knows, And since you actually have to subscribe to a new streaming service to watch Five Nights at Freddy's at home or wherever you want at your own convenience, that might have helped push some people to the theater. Maybe if it would have been available for I'm curious, if it had been available for a digital purchase, would that have changed where you saw Five Nights at Freddy's? How did you handle the option of theaters or subscribing to Peacock, which I think is a little bit of a different situation. But really, also, would Five Nights at Freddy's have done this well at the box office if it hadn't come out for Halloween weekend? Halloween is a tough holiday to figure out. We've all been there. We're probably all there right now. Because, what do you do beyond a Halloween costume party, right? And then trick-or-treating the day of. And even then, there's still a lot of days to fill because you're in the festive mood, especially when Halloween falls during the week. You're like, what are we going to do all weekend? We can't trick-or-treat till Tuesday. So Five Nights at Freddy's had fans going to the theaters in costume, right? And again, that helped with the social media and reports of them interacting, I think for the most part in a positive way, with the movie when they were seeing it. So Five Nights at Freddy's became a Halloween party itself. So even if you weren't sure if you wanted to see the movie, you were like, what should we do for Halloween? Everyone's seeing Five Nights at Freddy's. Let's give it a whirl. Almost 50, and this is proven in the numbers, almost 50% of the tickets were purchased day of. That's a lot of walk-up business. And 39% of the audience came in groups. It didn't go by themselves. So that's a party. And a Halloween party that almost everyone could attend thanks to that PG-13 rating. I know it bummed some of you out, but ka-ching, it's making so much money. Five Nights at Freddy's was, after all, a tween phenomenon when it started about a decade ago, and while those fans are now older and might have wanted something a little bit more, R-rated, there are new tween fans that have followed them into the fandom, and so those tweens could still be part of the party. And look at the demos. Again, the evidence is in the numbers. A shocking 81% is 13 to 24. That's amazing. And look how big the audience is. That's not like a small little group of teens and 20-somethings. That's a huge number of them. And I have a hunch that most older moviegoers went with the Peacock option. So again, Universal got everybody. And sure enough, the Hispanic demo led the charge for yet another horror movie with the Caucasian audience right behind, and then a smaller turnout from Black and Asian audiences. Five Nights at Freddy's didn't have a very diverse audience. And if they make a sequel, I think that would be my one note for them, to try and go a little bit more after that market to see if they can boost the numbers even more. And while the critic score was once again awful for a video game adaptation, just like with Super Mario Brothers, glad I was on the right side. I still don't like Super Mario Brothers. I'm sorry. I don't think it's accessible for non-fans. Well, I think Five Nights at Freddy's is. But anyway, yes, so horrible critic score. But this time, interestingly, moviegoers were even a bit divided about this film, with a solid number of complaints online that I saw that the movie just wasn't scary enough. In fact, many were saying that the similar 2021 Willy's Wonderland starring Mr. Nicolas Cage was a scarier, more accurate Five Nights at Freddy's. But let's put our business hats on. That movie didn't even make $1 million worldwide. And I know it was mostly a digital release, but it never got any recognition beyond the hardcore horror crowd. When people were like, oh, Willy's Wonderland was better, we all had to be like, to Google, let's look this movie up. What are you talking about? Whereas Five Nights at Freddy's has become a pop culture phenomenon beyond the video game space. But I have to counter, though, that Five Nights at Freddy's does have a strong audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, and the cinema score is also very, very strong, which fans can't influence. So that's a legit score. People who went to see Five Nights at Freddy's at theaters, where they take the cinema score, had a very good time. And Super Mario Brothers got an A. Now, keep in mind, again, that Five Nights at Freddy's is a kid-tween brand, and it was crucial to have that PG-13 rating. I'm glad that Jason Blum and Universal noticed that. I've seen Five Nights at Freddy's described as a gateway franchise that gets kids interested in the horror genre. So you think horror fans would be more supportive of it because, don't you want your numbers to grow? And a future sleepover staple. Oh, when I saw that, I was like, oh, again, more dollar signs for Universal. I was like, yes, play it at your sleepovers. Play it at the sleepover. Oh. Also, the film's lack of gore clearly allowed it to reach a larger audience. Not only people who don't like gore like myself, it's a horror movie that I can enjoy as well, but it also made sure that parents could take said kids and tweens, if, they wanted to, without getting grossed out themselves. Sometimes parents will be like, no, there's no way I'm watching that. But here they were like, okay, we can enjoy it with you. Or we can drop you off at the multiplex for a party, which I heard people were doing both. Again, I'd love to hear your Five Nights at Freddy's experiences. And some of you had such a good time, you wrote me that you went to see it multiple times the same weekend. Because again, it was not just about the movie, but the party that the movie represented. Made for just, as I said, $20 million, Universal is already making money off of this movie, especially with the worldwide number. And this should help not just Jason Blum, again, right after Exorcist, but everyone involved in the film, from stars Josh Hutcherson, Elizabeth Lail, and Matthew Lillard, to co-writer and director Emma Tammy, making a rare splash for women in the horror space. Let's hope she does a little bit better than Nia DaCosta seems to be doing. Poor Nia DaCosta. That Marvel deal seemed like such a great opportunity. All right, back to video game movies overall. Recently, the only one that hasn't really connected is Detective Pikachu. But I hear Netflix's upcoming Pokemon series is top-notch, and the Nintendo is very happy with it, particularly the VFX for the Pokemon themselves. So I'll be curious to see if they can make that connect. Netflix must be like, hurry up with that. Universal, of course, is also planning a long relationship with Nintendo themselves, including the theme park lands, and HBO has more The Last of Us coming. They're promising 2 more seasons, probably to try and get around the controversy that surrounded the second game. Although The Last of Us has surprisingly hit a lot of speed bumps. Not only the controversy over part 2, but they were supposed to do a multiplayer game, but it looks like that's been scrapped. So you're like, how are you guys fumbling the ball after such an amazing touchdown with The Last of Us? Trying to stay strong with that metaphor. All right, so anyway, Mortal Kombat 2, a bright spot during the pandemic, right, with those movies, was in the middle of filming before the actors' strike. We'll see when that can get going again. Sonic 3, along with a spin-off TV show for Paramount Plus, is on the way. There's also a Minecraft movie set for 2025. What's that going to look like? But I think people are going to show up with the way things are going. And the only real concern right now is the much beleaguered Borderlands movie, which apparently has undergone massive reshoots without director Eli Roth on set. They're like, you know what? We don't need that guy. And you're like, wow, that's bad. What video game adaptation do you think will seemingly come out of nowhere next? Fortnite. They would like to make a movie. They've been teasing ideas just this year, but they don't have a deal just yet. If I were a movie studio CEO or a producer, I would be on the phone with them right now. I'd be like, what do they like? Let's send them a gift basket. I need this deal. So again, what do you think will or should be the next big video game sensation in Hollywood? And yikes, let's move over to the rest of the movies playing. Killers of the Flower Moon fell 61%. It didn't open big enough to fall 61% in its second weekend, which seems to once again underscore that most people are waiting to watch the 3.5-hour movie at home. If at all. I mean, it's a Scorsese De Niro movie. I think most people would check it out, but it's tough. The runtime is difficult, and then it's going to go exclusively to Apple TV, I believe. We'll see. If I were Apple, as I said last week, I'd put it on digital. Just get people to see it. Although Apple TV, of course, also just announced they're raising their prices. It's interesting. We'll see how this goes. Anyway, on that, what are your plans with Killers of the Flower Moon? But anyway, on that note, speaking of the runtime, Killers of the Flower Moon was in the news again this weekend, with Paramount and Scorsese's team furious that some small independent theaters were inserting their own intermission. How dare they? But, I can understand being upset about that. But boy, I think that says you need an intermission. Because a lot of movies used to have intermissions, and they were still all considered prestige films. Spartacus, Ben-Hur, The Sound of Music, Dr. Zhivago, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and more. How can you say intermissions are bad with that kind of legacy? Now, sure, Oppenheimer didn't have one, and neither did Avengers Endgame, but those were event movies that fans were eager to see. They're like, let's do this. I'm not tearing myself away from this movie. But when you're unsure if you want to see a movie in theaters, I think a super long runtime is often the tiebreaker to wait, especially with the rise of digital and streaming. Now, I saw a couple of cinephiles who have been really aggressively championing Killers of the Flower Moon this whole time, saying it would be blasphemous to stick an intermission in there and just suck it up and be a cinephile. But I mean, don't you want your movies to do well? I mean, these box office numbers are bad for Killers of the Flower Moon. I mean, it's really going to put a kink in its awards awards chances, because it's starting to get a little bit of a loser stink on it. So, I mean, that doesn't help anybody. You would think if you were a cinephile, you would want to give these movies the best shot possible. And I'm telling you, this movie needed an intermission. I think for dramas, an intermission is a particularly good idea. And while it might be a pain for theaters, I mean, imagine scheduling this. The whole movie theater is going to empty out. You have to time it with other theaters letting out with their movies overall, because you don't want the bathrooms to get too crowded. And you want people to have time to go back to the concession stand and come back for the movie to start again. I mean, you can imagine the number of people at the manager's desk saying, my movie started again and I missed some of it and now I want my money back. I mean, I'd be like, you're not getting your money back. I guess you'd have to have somebody who works at the theater say, this is your 5-minute warning, your movie's about to start again. It would be a headache. But think about all the extra concession stand sales that you would hopefully get and people coming to the theater, because I think that would make it more of an event. You'd be like, ooh, an intermission. This is fun. This is old school. And as people also pointed out this weekend during this debate, plays have intermissions. They have 15-minute intermissions. That's enough time, although you really do have to run back. But, I think I am in favor of it. I think it's a good idea, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on intermissions for today's movies as well. When you watch them later, they're fun. They have like the picture come up and beautiful music, and you're like, oh, this is nice. All right, so anyway, as for the rest of the top 10, Taylor Swift had no problem just dropping one spot to number 2, because again, Killers of the Flower Moon offered up no real competition. Beaten by Taylor Swift. Woo, Marty thought it was bad with Marvel. Angel Studios is high up in the top 10 once again after The Sound of Freedom this summer, this time with their documentary After Death. And the bottom of the top 10, it's rough and weird down here. It's like the back of the bus. John Cena and Alison Brie's weird indie action movie that I didn't even know was coming out until I saw it playing an iPic, and I was like, what the heck is this? That managed to open at number 7 with just 2 million. It's number 7 with 2 million. And The Nightmare Before Christmas, in its second week of its re-release, dropped 53%, but is still in the top 10, because that's how bad the bottom of the top 10 is. All right, so over on streaming, what's everybody watching? Not at the theater. But we start with Nielsen, as usual, for the end of September. They're a month behind. Suits is still number 1 overall. For 1 week, it wasn't number 1, and then it got back up. But it's losing a little bit of steam. Come on, is anything else going to even bother to challenge it? Elemental is also going surprisingly strong in its 3rd week on Disney+. It dropped below 1,000, but it's up there. It's holding better than The Little Mermaid did. And Netflix's Reptile, also a movie, did very well, particularly for movies on streaming right now, which are having a tough time. It broke into the overall. Ahsoka couldn't do that. Ahsoka even slipped a little bit with its second to last episode. And we'll see how it does with the final episode, if maybe it gets a boost from people finally binging it. But yeah, as I said, it hasn't been able to get back on the overall chart. It's nice to see Gen V on here with its debut. We'll see if it grows in the coming weeks, because people have been discovering that show. But it's low. These numbers overall are very low. This is sad. It's especially bad for shows with high episode counts, thanks to having multiple seasons already that Nielsen, of course, notoriously counts as one. Like Only Murders, Wheel of Time, and The Morning Show, these should be much higher. Clearly, they're not getting new viewers interested in the previous seasons. They're just holding on to their subscribers. And if these shows were on Netflix, I don't think they'd still be going. Because I don't think I guess they'd be keeping people from churning, but these numbers are just low. With movies on the movies chart, Elemental, as I said, still rules, but The Little Mermaid, forget not being on the overall or holding as well as Elemental, it's totally fallen off the movies chart. And Encanto has yet to return. So it seems that Elemental and Moana are the new 2 Disney Plus movie constants. I'd be a little bit nervous about Encanto, especially since they're trying to push Encanto so much right now. I'd be nervous that it dropped off. Because why is Moana still going? All right, so anyway. And Max got a movie on here. They got anything on any of these charts. Poor Max. Although they apparently are the only streaming service that's approaching being profitable. They're like, without ever having anything on the charts. But yeah, the streaming debut of The Meg 2 got them on here. With Netflix, for just last week, Bill Burr took the top spot on the movies chart with Old Dads, which he directed and co-wrote. Good week for stand-up comedians, with Nate Bargatze, because of the actors' strike, getting to host SNL. Although Bill Burr, I don't know if Nate Bargatze's going to keep going. He's great. But Bill Burr's been working for a long time. He was on The Mandalorian. He hosted Saturday Night Live. So this is another big step for him to have a movie and to have it number one. And while No Hard Feelings is pretty low down, keep in mind that it just hit Netflix on the last day of this chart's window on a Sunday. So we'll really get an idea of how it's doing on Netflix next week. With series, The Fall of House of Usher and Beckham switched places, but both have very low numbers. Usher, while it certainly has its fans, I'm so glad that some of you liked it so much, but Mike Flanagan is supposed to deliver more than this. And we all know that he wants to take on Clayface for DC, but if he doesn't have a deal at this point, if I were James Gunn, I wouldn't give him one, because this is weak. It would shake my confidence in his ability to capture a large audience again, especially after he messed up The Shining. I know some of you like that movie too, but it was a clunker, business-wise. And I hated it. All right, so anyway, Bodies and I Woke Up a Vampire both had soft debuts. And then over on iTunes, go Tom Cruise, kind of. This is a little bit of a difficult situation for him. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is number one for the third week in a row. Yet it was just announced that the sequel has been delayed a year and will not be called Part 2. Even though the last movie ended on a cliffhanger and did not finish its storyline. So if it might not be called Part 2, but it's gonna have to be a part 2, unless they do some other way to wrap up the storyline. What, are they gonna start from scratch on the next movie? That doesn't make any sense. No, that's probably why they need an extra year to figure out how the heck they're gonna untangle this disastrous, ball of yarn. It's a disaster. And it's such a good movie too. The Barbenheimer really obliterated the whole Mission Impossible franchise, it seems. Have you watched it on digital or on digital? I mean, it's such a good movie. I mean, it really is good. So anyway, Barbie, who was part of the people who killed Mission Impossible, and Equalizer 3 are still going very strong. Well, Talk to Me, The Exorcist, and Saw X are enjoying brisk business this Halloween weekend. Also, while Julia Garner and Jessica Henwick, two awesome actresses, have gone straight to digital with The Royal Hotel, Hugo Weaving is also in that, that's a good cast, at least they debuted at number 5, so they can feel good about that. As for this coming weekend, with no big movie opening, what a hole in the schedule, can Five Nights at Freddy's, Taylor Swift, and Killers of the Flower Moon avoid big drops at the box office next weekend? I think all of those are looking at maybe huge drops, but maybe they can avoid it because of the lack of competition. Well, big competition. There's a smattering of movies that might be able to make the most of this opportunity. Sofia Coppola's Priscilla and Alexander Payne's The Holdovers are two awards contenders that go pretty much wide this weekend. So you might want to check those out. There's also Meg Ryan in a new romantic comedy opposite David Duchovny, which she directed. And there's also Radical, the uplifting Spanish-language film starring Eugenio Derbez, who doesn't love Eugenio Derbez, as a maverick teacher trying to help his students in Mexico. I think all those movies look really good, actually, but in theaters, I don't think any of those movies look like they need to be seen in theaters. What do you think? So I think next weekend's box office is anybody's. I mean, it's wide open. I'm very curious to see how it shakes out. As for streaming movies, A Haunting in Venice finally comes home, and it's available on both digital and Hulu for Halloween on Tuesday. I think they missed the Halloween weekend. I think they might have been like, it drops on Halloween, and you're like, it's too late by then. Netflix has UK movie Locked In with Famke Janssen on Wednesday. It's so weird. Halloween is Tuesday, and then it's like Thanksgiving already. Or in many stores, Christmas, which really annoys me. I can't believe so many Christmas decorations went up before Halloween. This is getting out of control. It's bad enough they erased Thanksgiving to a degree, but Halloween? That was annoying. All right, so anyway, On Friday, Apple TV has new movie Fingernails with an all-star cast, a surprisingly good cast. Hulu has Quiz Lady, and Netflix drops awards contender Naiad, as well as its latest celebrity documentary, this time about Sylvester Stallone. Then with series, The Gilded Age returns tonight for season 2, now HBO's big Sunday night show. Season 1 aired on Mondays. Please try it. I love it so much. A lot of us do. And we really want season 3. So come on. Black Cake from Oprah Winfrey drops the first 3 episodes on Wednesday, and Netflix's documentary series Mysteries of Faith is also on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, Netflix has Sean Levy's adaptation of All the Light We Cannot See, and there's also the video game adaptation, the anime Onimusha out of Japan. And there's also a traffic jam on Thursday night with the drop of Loki Season 2, Episode 5, the first one that critics haven't seen either. The Gen V season finale, It's a Banger. That's amazing. I don't know what surprises are in store for Loki Episode 5 because I haven't seen it, but I've seen the Gen V season finale, and that's a big one. And then also Invincible Season 2 starts. Plus there's Thursday Night Football. Again, as I said, what a traffic jam. How are you going to direct traffic on Thursday night? Then on Friday, outright, because those are all technically Friday shows, Netflix has Selling Sunset Season 7, South Korea's Daily Dose of Sunshine, which I included because maybe it'll be another Extraordinary Attorney Woo. And then there's also more animation, this time with Blue Eye Samurai. I like how that rhymes. That's nice. So that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what do you think of Five Nights at Freddy's Boffo debut and the future of the video game industry in Hollywood? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.